My freeloading friends tried finessing me in their dinner bill, but I got my portion split before it came to the table. I got invited to a group dinner and decided to go. Normally, I'd avoid it like the plague because two couples in the group were notorious freeloaders. They'd order the most expensive items, stack up cocktails and appetizers, and then insist we split it evenly when the check came. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there with a single meal and a soda, getting screwed over every time. The only reason I agreed to go this time was because I was assured they wouldn't be there. But of course, surprise, surprise, they showed up. I wasn't about to cause a scene over it, but I knew exactly how this was going to play out, so I decided to get ahead of it. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself, found our server, and asked him to separate my bill before anything else came to the table. He agreed without hesitation. When the check finally arrived, I casually handed over my card and paid for my portion, leaving a solid 25% tip. That's when one of the freeloaders, looking genuinely offended, spoke up. "Oh, I thought we were splitting it like usual." I just shrugged. "Oh well, that's your bad." That's when two other people in the group suddenly decided they wanted their bills separated too. The freeloaders started panicking, realizing their usual scam wasn't going to work this time. They ended up stuck with their ridiculous bill, scrambling to split it between themselves. The tension at the table was thick, but I just sat back, sipping my soda, enjoying the best meal I'd ever had. What is the saddest moment of your life? Last April, everything changed. I was sitting in class when a voice message from my mom came through. I put on my headphones, expecting something casual, but what I heard froze me. Her voice was shaky. "There's been an accident," she said. "Your dad didn't make it." She explained they'd been in a car crash and told us to take care of each other. "We love you," she said, her voice breaking. I sat there, unable to move, tears streaming down my face. My brother, joking with his friends in the hallway, saw me and came over, asking what was wrong. I couldn't speak. I just handed him my headphones and pressed play. I watched his face crumble as he listened. Soon after, our sister called. None of us could say much. We just sat there in silence, knowing. An hour later, two officers came to get us. They drove us to the station, where our sister was waiting. We hugged tightly, all of us crying. The officers explained a drunk driver caused the crash. Dad died on impact, and Mom passed soon after. The driver? Only minor injuries. I felt numb. The weeks after blurred together. My brother and I, both minors, were terrified of being separated. Thankfully, our sister became our legal guardian, keeping us together in our parents' house. It's been the hardest year of our lives. We do our best, just like Mom asked. But some nights, the emptiness feels unbearable. We miss them every day, but through it all, we still have each other, and that's what keeps us going.
Fathers, what's the worst thing you've ever done? My daughter has been dating Jake for 2 years. Before I met him, she warned me not to mention his family, especially his dad, because it was a sensitive topic. I didn't pry. From what I saw, Jake was a great guy, responsible, polite, and head over heels for my daughter. A few days ago, my daughter and Jake came over. I was outside working on my car when Jake joined me, looking curious. He admitted he didn't know the first thing about car maintenance, so I offered to teach him. He picked it up quickly, and by the end, I patted his back and said, "Well done, son." His smile vanished, and tears started welling up. Before I could react, he broke down completely. My daughter came out, saw him sobbing, and whisked him inside. That night, she was furious with me. She told me never to call him son again, reminding me I wasn't supposed to bring up anything about his family. I tried to explain it just slipped, but she wasn't having it. A couple of days later, she called to apologize for yelling and said Jake wanted to talk. When we sat down, he opened up about his past. His dad had betrayed him in the worst way, cheating with his college girlfriend. The fallout destroyed him. He dropped out, fell into depression, and cut his dad off completely. Recently, he found out his dad had passed away and left him a letter. At the end of the letter were the words, "Well done, son." Hearing me say it brought everything crashing back. He told me he wasn't angry, just overwhelmed by the timing. I told him I was proud of him, not just for what he's overcome, but for the man he is now. I meant every word.
My husband visited his parents in a different country while I was about to give birth, so I gave him instant karma. My husband and I were expecting twins, and my pregnancy had been brutal. I was scheduled for a C-section due to complications, and recovery was going to be rough. But instead of being by my side, my husband decided he needed to visit his parents in another country for 6 weeks. His excuse? They don't have much money, and they already booked a non-refundable flight. Mind you, his parents knew when my surgery was scheduled, but it got worse. He asked me to reschedule my C-section. First, he wanted me to move it earlier, like major surgeries are something you can just reschedule. Then, he suggested I push it after his trip. I reminded him these were his kids too. I told him while he'd be off enjoying time with his family, I'd be home, alone, recovering from surgery, and caring for 2 newborns, but he didn't care. The next day, I overheard him on the phone with his brother. They were laughing, saying I was just being hormonal and unreasonable. His brother even said, "She'll be fine, just go." And so he did. A week later, I got a letter from his parents with a family photo inside, matching sweaters, big smiles, like everything was perfect. Meanwhile, I was at home, stitched up, exhausted, and holding 2 babies who deserved better. When he came back 6 weeks later, I was ready. I handed him divorce papers at the door. I haven't spoken to him since. Some choices come with consequences, and he made his.
What have you accidentally conditioned your pet to do? 1. When I was little, I would constantly carry around one of my cats, Feist. Since my hands were full with her, I would use one of her outstretched paws to turn on lights whenever we entered a room. Now, the little rascal switches them on and off for fun. 2. Our cat had impacted anal glands for a while. We had to bribe him with treats to let us check and make sure he was doing all right. Now, when he wants a treat, he comes up and sticks his butt in our faces. 3. My niece loves to FaceTime my mom to talk to her dog. When the dog was a puppy, my mom used to pull her onto her lap during FaceTime calls. Now, the dog is 80 pounds and will jump in your lap if your phone or tablet starts making the default FaceTime ring. 4. I picked my kitten up a few times to kill some spiders up high for me. Now, whenever I pick her up, she looks up at the ceiling searching for spiders. 5. My dog knew he would always get some ice to chew when I went to the fridge, so anytime he heard the ice machine start, he would come running. After he became deaf, he would feel the vibrations in the floor and knew it was ice time. 6. Somewhere along the way, my dog learned that get your toy means to pick up his nearest toy. I didn't purposely train him to do it, but it's useful when he's about to leave one of them outside, and I want him to bring it in. If there's no toy around, and I say this, he'll grab the nearest soft thing, usually some piece of clothing lying around. One time, he tried to pick up the cat. 7. I take baths with my cat by letting her float in a plastic box. I keep the box in my closet. I only started doing this about a month ago, but now when I turn the bath water on, she runs to the closet and jumps in her box.
My parents kicked me out at 18 and left me homeless. 10 years later, they broke into my house while I was gone, so I left them homeless. I was 30, and they hadn't been a part of my life for over a decade. They'd kicked me out at 18 with no support, no backup plan, and no second thought. I ended up homeless, sleeping in a tent during winter until a kind neighbor helped me reconnect with my grandparents. They took me in, helped me rebuild my life, and eventually sold me their house at a fraction of its value when they retired. Fast forward to 2021, and I came back from a 2-week work trip to find an unfamiliar van in my driveway. Inside, my parents acted like they had every right to be there. Their business had gone bankrupt, and they'd lost everything. Instead of asking for help, they broke into my home claiming, "This used to be your grandparents' house, so it's ours." I told them to leave. They refused. They even lied to the police, saying we had a verbal rental agreement. With no cameras to prove otherwise, I had to file for eviction. For months, they lived rent-free, contributing nothing but drama. My mom tried taking over my house, demanding the master bedroom and rearranging my living room. I refused, and every time they guilted me, I reminded them they hadn't hesitated to throw me out at 18. After 4 months, the court ruled in my favor, giving them 30 days to leave. They called me ungrateful and selfish, but I didn't care. On their last day, March 3rd, I watched them pack into a tiny studio apartment, the same fate they'd forced on me years ago.
When did you realize, oh crap, I'm the one being creepy? This happened when my son was just a year old, during a phase where he refused to sleep in his own crib. Most nights, my wife and I would bring him into bed with us so he wouldn't wake up crying. The problem was I snore a lot, and I sleep heavily. Our routine became that I'd eventually wake him up with my snoring, my wife would nudge me awake, and I'd relocate to the pull-out sofa in the living room. We kept that sofa made up as a bed, knowing I'd end up there most nights. So one night, the usual happens. I wake up to my son crying, and my wife gives me the familiar nudge to move to the sofa. Half asleep and barely aware, I shuffle out to the living room and flop onto the sofa, trying to settle in. My hand reaches out for something soft and warm, and in my dazed state, my brain doesn't register much. I instinctively give it a little squeeze, thinking it's my son's foot. Then, the foot jerks away. I lay there for another moment, assuming my wife must have left our son out here with me for some reason, but then, out of nowhere, it hits me. I'd completely forgotten we had guests staying over that night. My wife's friend and her 2-year-old daughter were in town, and they were the ones on the sofa. I was lying there next to them, squeezing her daughter's foot, totally oblivious. Panic washed over me as I realized what I'd done. I slowly snuck out of the living room, hoping they wouldn't notice. In the morning, I went straight to my wife's friend to apologize. She laughed it off, saying she'd heard my son crying and figured I was just tired and confused. Still, even years later, I feel embarrassed every time I think about how close I came to making the world's creepiest first impression.
What has your manager asked you to do that you outright refuse to do? Years ago, I worked in the secure computer room at a large company. There was one unbreakable rule. No one gets in without their ID card. No exceptions. The doors were locked from the outside. And if you didn't have your card, you weren't getting in. End of story. Everyone knew the rule, and it came straight from the VP himself. One day, the VP of our division showed up at the door without his card. He knocked on the glass, and I walked over to see what he needed. Through the glass, he said, "Let me in." I asked, "Where's your card?" He sighed and said he'd left it in his office. I told him, "You'll have to go get it." He wasn't happy. "I'm the VP. Just open the door," he barked. I calmly replied, "Then you should know the rule. No card, no entry." He glared at me and growled, "Let me in now, or you'll regret it." I shook my head and walked away. Fuming, he went to the pass-through window and demanded my manager let him in. My manager unlocked the door, and the VP stormed past me, glaring and muttering, "You're in big trouble." An hour later, my manager called me into his office. The VP wanted me suspended for insubordination, but I was ready. I pulled out a copy of the memo the VP had sent months earlier, clearly stating no card, no entry, no exceptions. I explained I followed his rule. If I had let him in, I'd be breaking it, and then he'd have grounds to punish me, but I didn't, so he doesn't. My manager tried not to laugh as he said, "You're excused." Nothing more came of it, but I heard through the grapevine that the VP wanted something on my file. My manager reportedly told him, "If you're going to make rules like that, you should be praising her for following them."
What did you do as a child that you hid from your parents? I didn't find out what my sons had been up to until years later. My oldest told me casually, like it was nothing. When they were younger, they'd go out in the backyard and throw knives at each other to practice catching them. They'd seen it in video games and thought it was something they should know how to do. I'd noticed my knives had nicks in them back then, but I figured they'd been using them to cut branches or do something equally stupid. I had no idea they were turning my backyard into their own personal weapons training ground. Years later, after high school, my son went to Alaska to work in the fisheries. When he wasn't working, he'd go exploring in the woods. There was a couple there who had broken up, and the ex-girlfriend had taken an interest in my son. He wasn't interested, but her ex-boyfriend didn't care. He saw my son as a threat. One day, while hiking, my son realized someone was following him. He turned around just in time to see the jealous ex, knife in hand. Before he could react, the guy threw it at him. Without thinking, my son caught it midair like it was nothing. As a mother, I had two immediate thoughts. First, what the hell were my kids doing throwing knives at each other? Second, I really wish I could have seen that guy's face.